Hey legends, and welcome back to the gaming channel, where we're covering one of the biggest events of the year. Unless you've been living under a media blackout, you'd know that Sony just streamed its PlayStation 5 reveal. For those of you who don't have an hour plus to spare to go over the full video, in this summary we'll aim to condense down the big dot points. Since its hardware and spec list have been out for a while, what we'll focus on here is the many launch titles listed as part of the stream, including big hitters such as Gran Turismo, Grand Theft Auto, Hitman, and many others. Before we get into that, however, let's take a look at the styling of the unit itself. It appears to be going for a very post-futurist, Portal-esque sort of vibe. I think it's a good direction to break away from the more blocky look of the past consoles, and as much as I'm a sucker for that 90s broken blocky styling, this seems to be a better direction to go in for 2021. What do you guys think? Make sure to let me know down below. Now, let's move directly on to what we're all here for, the games. Namely, the first announcement of Gran Turismo 7. Gran Turismo has been a stalwart PlayStation title ever since I owned the original PSX in the late 90s. Each new generation of the console has to be christened with an appropriate Gran Turismo title, and PS5 is no different. Looking at what's been revealed of the game thus far, we can see the hub screen that defined the past games. It appears that, directionally, they're shifting back into that RPG-esque car buying and modifying aspect of the original games, rather than GT Sport's shift towards track racing and greater realism. We appear to have a load of different cars represented, from road-faring supercars to BAC monos and Group Cs. We'll of course go into more detail about all of this in future videos dealing directly with Gran Turismo 7, so if you're into sim racing, be sure to hit the sub and join us as we explore the run-up to the game's release. Speaking of which, how do you feel about the gameplay footage showcased thus far, displaying a notably more arcade handling model than GT Sport? Is this the direction you would have liked to see the game going? Moving on, their flagship announcement here is that Grand Theft Auto 5, in an expanded form, will be re-releasing on PS5. While it's a big name for Sony, ultimately it doesn't appear to represent anything which isn't already available on the PC, and I have to admit, someone in my position would rather have seen something like a remaster of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, for instance. The other big hitter title that's coming is Spider-Man Miles Morales. The title ties in with Marvel's progressive diversification of their properties, giving us a Spider-Man protagonist which isn't portrayed by Peter Parker. The reveal consisted entirely of pre-rendered cinematic footage, so it's difficult to get a feel for what the gameplay may be like at this point.
Go be a hero, Miles.
Next up is a new Ratchet and Clank game. I have to say, this really impressed me. Despite the target demographic being a mite younger for this title, the visuals and seamless interplay of different environments was breathtaking. It appears that in this new generation, we're finally able to get games which look like playing through a pre-rendered cinematic. This is something I only could have imagined as a child playing through the launch title Crash Bandicoot on the original PSX. Speaking of visually impressive titles, they've taken this opportunity to showcase a new title called Project Athia. While we didn't get much of a glimpse into any substantive gameplay footage at all, it's looking like it may be a promising action-adventure or RPG title of some sort. Moving forward in the adventure category, they appear to have something in store for the cat lovers among us. Taking place in what looks to be a charmingly stylized world of robots taking the place of human beings, Stray appears to put you in the figurative shoes of a cat wandering through this compelling world. Opening up the world of psychological Groundhog Day time loop titles, Returnal appears to have you taking on the role of an astronaut crash landing on an alien planet which has you stuck in a continual loop of being taken out. As is often the trope with this approach, the goal appears to be to break out of the cycle and escape your fate. The gameplay showcases third-person gunplay and exploration, leading this to likely be one of the more interesting and visually immersive titles launching on the new platform. Moving back to the realm of children's games, Sackboy appears to be a next-gen platform title which puts you in the role of a very stylized protagonist, making his way through a surreal world. Much as Ratchet and Clank, it appears to be a very visually impressive game, looking much like playing through a pre-rendered cinematic. Now, for a complete stylistic shift, Destruction Allstars appears to be a tournament royale derby style game where a collection of characters duke it out both in cars and on foot in large indoor arenas. It looks like a potentially interesting title, combining elements such as the distinct character personalities from games like Overwatch, with the arcade sports driving gameplay of Rocket League seemingly peppered with hand-to-hand combat. Kena, Bridge of Spirits looks like a very charming, cartoony title showcasing adventure and exploration gameplay in a very compelling, grandiose world. While we don't have very much information about it, coming from a small team with a background in film and animation, you can almost bet it will be a very narrative-centric experience. Now for something very near and dear to my heart, Oddworld's Soulstorm. Being one of the early, exceptionally charming titles on the original PSX, it's absolutely amazing to see Oddworld returning to the platform over 20 years later. In the spirit of the original, Oddworld appears to showcase exceptionally charming platform adventure gameplay. Ghostwire Tokyo is a new property showing a spooky, surreal version of modern-day Tokyo. It appears to be a first-person perspective title that can only loosely be called a shooter, as very little actual shooting appears to be taking place. While it's hard to discern whether the game takes place inside a computer program or features some sort of extraterrestrial ghostly entities, it does look very visually compelling. Jett, the Far Shore appears to take us back into the genre of galactic and/or terrestrial exploration games. Talking about carving a new future for a species, it showcases a lot of planetary surface exploration. Will this be the PS5's answer to No Man's Sky? Godfall, by the looks of the trailer, is a third-person action game focusing on mastering weapons and combos with an assortment of different characters. Appearing to be a sort of God of War light, it'll be interesting to keep an eye on this game as more information surfaces. Solar Ash is a game which looks visually very reminiscent of Risk of Rain 2. While the trailer doesn't betray much information, it appears to be a third-person action-adventure game with a focus on exploration in a world where the laws of physics appear to be somewhat less absolute. Going back to the old school, we have the return of the Hitman series. Not needing much explanation to anybody that's followed gaming over the last 2 decades, Hitman is a series of games in which you play the role of an assassin known as Agent 47, where each level is a multi-optional sandbox, enabling you to execute your target and complete your objectives in a number of different ways. Hitman 3 appears to be no different. Little Devil Inside seems to be a very charming monster hunting title focusing on both exploration and combat gunplay with a peppering of very quirky humor. NBA 2K21 represents the first and only sports title revealed on the new platform. While there isn't much substantive footage shown, we get to see some seemingly pre-rendered shots of dribbling, shooting and dunking, as well as some uncannily well-represented sweat lines. Bugsnax is another title aimed at children, opening with what appears to be a stylized female walrus impersonation of the late Steve Irwin. Featuring gameplay that appears to involve hunting down and eating living meals with their own ecosystems, this should be one you can safely put in front of your little ones. One of the big reveals was what appears to be a remaster of Demon's Souls. Bluepoint Games, the same studio which handled the PS4 remake of Shadow of the Colossus, with help from Sony's Japan studio, is handling the remaster. Demon's Souls was of course the spiritual predecessor to the hugely successful Dark Souls and Bloodborne games. A very cool looking title from Arcane Studios, Deathloop appears to be another title using the Groundhog Day time loop trope in order to move its narrative. Featuring first-person gameplay highly reminiscent of their Dishonored games, it appears to be set in an island where all the inhabitants are compelled to take out the protagonist as he attempts to find a way to survive and break the time loop. Resident Evil Village appears to be a dark, psychological horror thriller set in the well-expanded Resident Evil universe. Seemingly taking place in a remote environment, it marks the most realistic looking and least stylized title showcased in the PS5 reveal. Pragmata looks very reminiscent of the surrealism of Death Stranding. Seeming to be a very conceptual game and featuring a sort of post-apocalyptic Earth, this might be one to keep an eye on. Horizon Forbidden West continues on from Horizon Zero Dawn, following Aloy as she heads west in an effort to discover more about her people's past and conquer more territories. Well, that about wraps it up. What was the most exciting aspect of the reveal for you? Are you looking forward to the PS5's launch, or were you underwhelmed by what's been presented thus far? Be sure to let us know down below, and hit the sub to keep up to date with future gaming news as it unravels. Until next time, we'll see you later.